What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here and welcome to a new album review. Today I'm going to be reviewing the latest album from iconic, celebrated and beloved sensation of hip-hop Kendrick Lamar, entitled Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. This is his first album in 5 years after his last album Damn back in 2017, and this is the final album to be released through the label of Top Dog Entertainment. Before I start with my review on this album, I want to point this bit out that this is my first time ever reviewing any album in the hip-hop genre, and this album, being universally acclaimed, has been madly documented by many critics and people who were really digesting this massive project. So if there are any criticisms or things that have to be addressed, pointed out to me, please put them in the comments below, because I'm going to be doing my best to really dive into what I personally think, onto what's been said and talked about on the lyrical content side. But this is just going to be me doing my own version and attempt to talk about this album. This has been a widespread and really big album for Kendrick. And to summarize this album, this is an album that was made from Kendrick for Kendrick. And that couldn't be any better than that. This album is something different and something to behold. And I am not going to make any comparisons to this album and talk about the previous albums, although Kendrick's discography has been unanimously praised, like the critically acclaimed and beloved record of To Pimp a Butterfly, which was one of my favorite albums from the last decade, and no wonder that record, along with Good Kid Mad City, has been cited as one of the greatest albums of all time. But in terms of the discography itself, this is one of the most progressive and biggest form of ideas by any hip-hop artist in this generation. And while I did enjoy a lot of his last album, Damn, I think that album is probably my least favorite. But with that being said, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers is a massive, massive toll into what Kendrick wanted to express and to be in this honest way. The two sides on this album are, the first being the Big Steppers, and the second half of this album is the Mr. Morale section. And we all know that this is a therapy album for Kendrick. The first track on the album, United in Grief. Vocal harmonies in a calm and resonating way, opening lyrics about finding some peace of mind in this lifetime, and then abruptly discovers into a ton of multiple beats and editing, which makes it just uncontrollable right from the start. Piano notes, big beats, and the huge bass coming into the mix. Kendrick mentions parts like the amount of days that his last album was when Damn was released, in exactly 1,855 days, on Friday the 13th as well. Therapy and other mentions on real estate investments, his mental health, and money that has been spent uselessly just for the rap culture. A ton of stuff going in many directions, but it delivers in this aggressive way from its power. And I also want to point out that it did challenge many listeners, but I love the album for that. And I really don't understand the negativity and the gripes that many people were so turned off and against what Kendrick wanted to do on this record, because it is so out there, but it is profoundly unique. And speaking of some more aggressive numbers, the next track, N95, is another one. Don't get confused with the title, because we know it has to do with N95 COVID masks, but that is not what the song is really about here. And that was taken cleverly as a metaphor. Multi-tracked vocal performances at the start. Kendrick dives in with a soft, smoother tone while the electric beat attacks as he does a ton of interaction to himself, and this makes a beautiful ambience and textures that splashes in with the whole instrumentation in a comfortable way. Bars on this track that mentions the market crash because of the pandemic in America, and as well as later on into the track, he expresses himself as a hypocrite, though calling out others as hypocrites due to the uses of racism in separate verse sections. And it does put into a message on people who are on the negative side of expression to target people. But this is a very strong song. That's one of my favorites. Worldwide Steppers. Brief intro with the controversial Kodak Black, who would later on pop in occasionally on later tracks on this record. Doorsteps, and musically, this is like on a multiplying, repetitive, looping direction. And Kendrick into these lyrics raises his family while the chaos was going on, and even references onto religion, suffering through writer's block. And this is on an instant change of pace. How many times he had sex with different women. Two other points that his ancestors would be totally against him from his actions. And also his partner Whitney makes a few appearances as if these questions would be asked. And the second half with the damage he thinks he has caused with the violence of freedom of speech that has been totally worse, criticizing himself of providing food that would cause high blood pressure and complications during the Top Dog Entertainment toy drive event, his disdain on capitalism. Die Hard is just beautiful. I adore this song. This is one of my favorites on this record, and it has a soulful hook onto it, just like with the chorus. This is a memorable song. Blast's appearance was melodic and gorgeous, and it does also feature Amanda Rafer battling his own demons, but he's so expressive. Gets more emotional into the later lyrics about the aspects onto his darker side of life to overcome the past from his beliefs in himself. And this is one of my favorites and highlights on the album because of the stunning instrumentation and vocal performances. One of the strongest cuts on the album. The next track, Father Time, wonderfully opens on strings and violins, foot tapping to continue, and the intensity booms right in. A very aggressive tangent. Sampha's brief melody that does fit in a compelling way, and the music to me is like on a classic nostalgia 90s flavor from Mental Health again, but besides the fatherhood, which was brutal, and citing daddy issues as multiple reasons and stuff onto generations to gang culture. Kendrick's his therapist, who would remain pretty consistent into what the overall themes are. Later on into this track, he really wants to seek more counseling. The interlude of Rich. This interlude brings back Kodak Black. The piano on this song is rapidly increasing more and more speed, but it does make a separate imagery to be in some kind of uncomfortable tension. Other sounds that do progress in this brief interlude: simplicity with Sampha's backing vocals that do pop in and out, goes on how he describes his difficulty as a rapper from his career, journey through the industry into the rap scene, and then says in the last half of this track that he has improved himself despite the controversial attacks he went through, and with the mentions onto his prison time, as his fear would be coming into his mind because of his problems from his past state of behavior. Then it goes into Rich Spirit. The instrumentation to this one was lovely, and weirdly it takes me in like this classic DJ Shadow 90s, introducing hand claps to come in as well as high vocal tracked noises. Sam Do defines this one so well, and the address is onto the lyrical purpose on this one. Kendrick says about his own self-doubt and references to the idolization, the man nickname that he was given since childhood. Then again, that has been mentioned previously onto a track of Humble earlier in his career. The fasting term from eating to drinking. Other lines go onto his feelings of morality and latency, brings in the lack of faith upon himself and upbringing. Last verse-wise mentions his cousin, Baby Keem, and telling him not to take the advantage of being naive while going through the music industry, as well as going into fame and fortune. We Cry Together. This is absolutely another one that is so great. It is perfection. It does credit the wonderful performance of Tyler Page, intensifying composition in like old school Eminem, like on the track of Kim from Marshall Mathers LP. Kendrick's and Tyler's performances together, staggering result. The interpretations were just crafted in a phenomenal form of emotional, draining state of hip-hop being absent away from her for 5 years, and as well as different women she thinks that Kendrick did screw, praying in church to cheating on one another. One of the kind best performances on this record put together. The last half of the album, Purple Hearts, to conclude the Big Steppers, Summer Walker, and Wu-Tang Clan's very own Ghostface Killer. The instrumentation was fantastic, attacking smack on the drums to synthesizer effects, lyrics-wise impacting on the feelings of love and diving into more on the spirituality and religious side of views. Some point in the first verse, there's a part of Kendrick's experience of being distant socially that could be a thing of not finding a spiritual connection with anyone who'll understand, plus being away from the toxic relationship on social media. Ghostface Killer's emotions in the biblical references in his own mood were really good, and even Summer's vocals sounded gentle and comforting along with this music that sounded very, very good onto this track. Count Me Out, the beginning of the Mr. Morale section. The beginning does refrain back to like similar lyrics from the beginning of this record. The instrumental part was mellow, features terrific rhythm, and female backing vocals to great hook in this laid-back texture, and then more boosted bass lines to come in with disco type of banging sound effects. Kendrick's expressions are on with the thing of being obligated to open himself up in a relationship, but then later on realizes that he is too good for this person and has to speak the truth, leaves the relationship, think about bringing some more positivity in himself, plus bars onto looking for the bedroom, although never had affairs with sleep, and that's been added more onto this intimacy way of context. Talks about the gun violence from his past that he went through since childhood in Compton, and there are other points into these lyrics where he expresses burnout and reflecting on the bad obsession on society's attachment of work, and says his own work over time wasn't fulfilling and became pointless. Crown is another one that I do love. One of my favorites on here, piano heavy sound from the sample of Through the Night by David Timothy, lower vocal registers, and did credit a sweet yet meditative tone on the harmonies. The chords are wonderfully added into the overall impact. Kendrick onto this one says that he wants to do his best to please everyone in anything that he wants to do or does with the fans and the community, but then as we hear the track on the chorus wise, he can't please everybody with what he wanted to do because on the way he has expressed and addresses things into his lyrics, and yet alone adds points that he feels like that there's something missing that can't be completed. The bridge section was used in a way that he used these lines on reflecting the stress he felt through that stress because of him being known as a big figure of hip-hop and the overall pressure to live up to the expectations of people who idolizes and adores him. Silent Hill brings back Kodak Black, bouncy beat, which is also excellent, upbeat flow, electronic synthy type notes, and it's a really good piece with words to whole aspects of life and success and relationships that are fake. Lines like on spending money to hide any trauma and childish behavior, hence the metaphor on the peekaboo section of lyrics. On Kodak's turn, he does make a line onto ring pop reference because he compares the size of his ring to that candy and exaggerates his wealth. Also a few bars when he was in the studio after spending time from prison after a shooting in February earlier this year at a nightclub. Interlude of Savior. Baby Keem returns onto his difficulty growing up with his family, pointing out his overcoming and society, and we hear Kendrick's therapist again on this section with his spoken word on the introduction. Baby Keem used the term strung out because of his mother's drug addiction. His uncle stole from him after Christmas, to seeing them both in jail when Baby Keem visits them, drug businesses, to other family members being affected by gun violence, Baby Keem when he was a former NBA player, amongst other things, all at once in this interlude. And then the Savior track after this one comes in with reverse vocals in the start, and this beat is adding padded rhythm that's catchy and creative. All at this point, Kendrick and Baby Keem, and as well as Sam Do, all collaborate together. This dives into the mentalities and struggles onto society even more, plus the lines onto counterproductive natures, his critics, judging him from his actions and choices, the disdain for people's opinions from fear on disagreement, calling the culture to be real and human, plus divisions on the Black American soul. Later on into how rappers choose to go along with these trends than standing out and voicing their beliefs, getting caught with COVID and then questioning Kyrie. More political topics like the Vladimir Putin mention while the Ukraine and Russian war is going on still, and says he is making nightmares from starting it, although he thinks we all have war, like mentally. And as well as he spoke about being honest and having the desire to help others and save everyone, but as a man, not as a messiah. One of the controversial numbers is the next track of Auntie Diaries. These words are onto Kendrick's experience from his uncle's transition of being transgender in this image and sexuality, add his own views onto critique himself and also referencing the LGBTQ community, descriptive rhyming, but with the dangerous F slurring on the homophobia, quiet on the first half, then on the second, he moves into more volume and louder sound as the music compresses and increases. He grew these past actions when he was a kid. Using these slurs really is just a very sad thing and form on reality that's still disgusting, and not accepting the people who are in that sexuality because of their choices and what they decided to do and who they choose to be. Plus the lines about the church that have been treating these people differently and questioning the preacher. I think it's still one of the other best tracks on this album. However, I do understand that it does make stir for other people's thinkings and ways of controlling their aggression towards Kendrick's use onto the slurring. And with that being said, I really do appreciate that there are people that do respect and defend, and I do think this is very brave. I have no problem with anybody who are changing their looks and sexualities. Makes this track to make us realize that we need to grow and accept these types of things. So that's personally like my take on it, because loads of people have their own views and beliefs on what they think about this or that and what Kendrick has been saying. Mr. Morale, a track which did cover into the trauma, continuation, and sexual violence from childhood, other people like Robert Kelly to Oprah Winfrey. This is basically a composition where Kendrick raps with a ton of energy as the track proceeds into repeating words of heavy, mentions his mother being sexually abused at a young age, and same goes with another person called Tyler Perry from his experience, discovers into other victims from people that I've said in this track who went through the sexual violence and abuse. But the most powerful song on this album is Mother I Sober. This is emotionally draining, and he shows his darkest experiences onto the abuse with his mother, going through intense addiction to loads of other violence, works to build the tears to the listener, and it adds a lot of power and yet chilling and impending expression in these lyrics. This is one of Kendrick's highlights as a lyricist. His faith on Christianity that was a part on his identity, traumatizing and yet amazing poetic imagery with these vulnerable, innocent and disturbing things into this context. Beth Gibbons from Portishead makes her appearance, and she does make this brief chorus just as really huge with this type of vibe. What can I really say about this track? It was awe-inspiring, and it is just something really gigantic with multiple occasions of breaking down to tears, and it's a stunning masterpiece. One of the soul-crushing into this sheer honesty from Kendrick. The last track on the album is Mirror. Kendrick this time, along with Kodak Black, decides to choose themselves as being themselves, and instrumentally, weirdly, is on a bit of like that poppy, positive vibe, dives into lyricism, onto fame and the negativity, onto living while battling through his recovery from his demons, all the pain and the brutality from the last track and other ones combined. And it's a big release and a breath of fresh air, this reflective but relevant way to conclude this album in the way that he decides to choose himself and his family over anything else, with the acceptance with anyone that he wants to be human like many. Overall, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers by Kendrick Lamar, what an album from beginning to end. And that's personally all I would like to say about this album. Let me know what you guys think of this in the comments down below. Do you think this is his masterpiece? Do you think this is one of his best albums and one of your favorite albums of the year? As I am very curious. I'm going to give Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers by Kendrick Lamar a 9 out of 10. This is just jaw-dropping. A master like Kendrick can put all of his heart and soul. One record that would later on be, like To Pimp a Butterfly, maybe be celebrating as one of the strongest records that he's ever done. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.